Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Sales Scoop. This is a show for startups who want to improve how they sell. My name's Alistair Cole. I'm your host for today's session. I am an ex-software engineer and computer scientist with 2 decades of experience in sales and marketing. And I'm joined today by my co-host and co-founder, Kieran.
Good afternoon, Alistair. Hello, my name is Kieran Gill, and I am a business development expert, I'm going to call myself today, and also a sales operation leader. And I'm a co-founder of the Uplift partnership with Alistair.
Thank you, my friend. And together with our CTO, Douglas, we accelerate sales for startups. Today's topic is unpacking the sales process, a blueprint for startups. And we're going to dive straight in to the sales process with a little bit of data and a bit of insight that we've seen over the last few months in our work with startups, over 50 of them through our 360 sales diagnostic. 49.6 is the average score for the overall sales process within startups under 5 years old. So a smidge under 50%. And that's not really a great score for something that's so important as part of the sales strategy element of being a startup. So a little bit lower than I would expect. Kieran, have you got any thoughts on some of the areas that you've seen that are holding startups back in that sales process?
I think it's something that I repeated before in our conversations where I've said sales processes tend to become an ad hoc kind of process where companies will devise a sales process and then nobody actually follows it as time goes on, and it becomes more erratic and it's just random. Everyone, people who are following it are doing random things. I know as a startup, we're a startup ourselves, Alistair, but hopefully we bring our professionalism to the way we do things. But working with the companies we've worked with and working with the companies beforehand, when it comes down to success, the simple thing is a sales process helps you sell. And it also helps, or it facilitates the purchase for the buyer. And that's what it's there for. It's not there to do anything else. It's there to help the buyer purchase from you, and it's helping your sellers or yourself keep on track by following a process that you have devised to help you sell into that particular market or customer base that you've targeted.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You talk about the maturity. We gauge the startups we work with on their maturity across lots of different areas, and sales process is one of them, all the way from ad hoc, all the way through to kind of formal structured, and then dynamic and agile, where they're actually able to adapt that process depending on the kinds of buyers they're talking to. So that maturity is really important. And we're hoping through our work that score of 49.6 will edge up as startups get a stronger process. So we're going to dive into our 8-stage process and share those stages with you. But it's worth just doing a little bit of setup, which is that those 8 stages are how we feel that startups should be handling their leads and their opportunities across the cycle, right? Across the whole sales cycle. What we're assuming, or we're taking as done already, are some of the background pieces, the setup pieces. So market research, target customer identification, sales metrics, ideal customer profile definitions, value propositions, product repositioning, and messaging. So we assume that everything is done and that we've got a list of quality leads that we're about to go out and work with on the sales process. So taking that and bearing that in mind, Kieran, what is the first of 8 stages that you would recommend for a startup?
Okay, so we've done the foundation work, as you said. We've got a product. We know what it is. We need to, first of all, before we even start doing any of the first process parts, is thinking about the person that we're selling to or the companies that we're selling to and what potentially will be their buying approach to what we're selling. Because we want to make sure that our sales process is basically mimicking their purchasing process. Because if it doesn't, and there's a misalignment, that's where you might find that you might lose some of your customers within your sales funnel or your sales circle or whatever you want to call it nowadays. It's called so many different things. So, and once that's done, once you've got your product and you know what your product price point is, now there are two fundamental things at the cold stage. We call this cold. This is what we call it at Uplift. This is the first stage of your buying process. And in your cold process, you're setting yourself up. Nobody knows about your product. Everybody out there is cold to you, and you are going to warm them up through your sales process to get to a position where you're going to have a meeting. In that cold process, there are two ways to look at this. There's one that is inbound leads, and there are one or inbound process, an inbound sales process, where people are going to come to you. And then there is an outbound process where you are going to approach people or customers out there or potential customers. And that's the first stage. Now, if you're doing an outbound side of things, it's going to be that you've got a target list that is identical to your ideal customer profile. So we know what our ideal customers look like, that we know who we want to target, and we have a list of names of people that we are going to actively try to approach to make contact with. If it's inbound, that's more marketing from my point of view. I'm not a marketeer. My friend Alistair here is. And what you would be doing there from an inbound point of view, you're creating content or content marketing where you're attracting people to come to you to say, "Ooh, hello, that looks interesting what you're doing." And that's your first phase, Alistair.
Yeah. Yeah, and the bit that jumps out for me in that first stage, which we call cold, is that the prospect matches the ideal customer profile, right? There's no point reaching out or creating content if it's inbound for somebody who isn't your ICP. And I think companies that have a well-defined ICP, I think they tend to do better by 68% or something like that, according to Gartner. So actually writing it down, having that ideal customer profile defined is critical. Great. So thank you. So stage one is cold. What's stage two of 8?
Well, funnily enough, stage 2 is now warm. So you've gone out, and let's keep this conversation going about the two tracks. We've got outbound and we've got inbound. Now, the great thing about an inbound lead is that they've basically qualified themselves and they've approached you for a meeting. So they can go straight from warm, where they've interacted with content, they've gone to your website and they've said, theoretically, we want to meet with you because whatever you're saying or however you're marketing your product resonates with us, and we have that particular problem and we want to learn more. It doesn't mean that they want to purchase, it means that they want to learn more. So that can go straight, that might even skip a few steps for you in the sales process, because they've turned themselves and they've qualified themselves. From an outbound point of view, what you're doing in the warm phase 2, is that you're trying to have a conversation with the client. You're trying to get to a position where the person wants to actually interact with you. Now, in the buying process, this is the awareness stage. Now, some clients or some prospects are aware of the challenges that they might actually have. So thus, they are trying to solve that challenge. However, sometimes your solution might be something, well, it might be solving a problem or a challenge that prospect might not even know they have. So you need to then make them aware of this potential, cost saving or potential even upselling, that they could suddenly make more money out of this. So in this awareness stage, that warm stage 2 is all about giving the prospect, the customer, the potential clients, all the information they need to make that informed decision to say, wow, actually what you're doing makes total sense for me.
Okay, and is this stage 2, the warm stage, is this where the relationship effectively begins?
Yes, this is where your SDR, your sales development representative, or your account team, or the founder, depending on how big your team is trying to basically build relationships and talk to people.
And that makes sense, right? That stage 2 is warm. It's the beginning of that nurturing, and we've turned the temperature up from cold into warm for stage 2. What's stage 3 then?
Oh, This is where we're getting really technical. This is hot. So we've gone from cold, warm to hot. And at the hot stage, the prospect, let's call him a prospect. I keep on jumping around with phrases here, but I'm going to call him a prospect. The prospect is now ready to meet you and have a meeting. Now, remember, we're talking about B2B complex selling. Now, at this phase, there will be a meeting. If we're selling something that is complex, where a client and our sales process, the process that I'm speaking about this moment in time, is a complex process where you are going to have multiple meetings with somebody to find out whether the solution that you have or the products that you have actually make sense to them to purchase, because they need to find out more. However, you might be selling something that actually is very easy, where they might have to trial the product. So it could be a product that you built. It's a SaaS product. It's easy to purchase. At that point, you might they might be able to have a trial of the product. So it depends, and this is where we go back to the nuances of sales processes. What are you selling? Who is the buyer? And at that point, you've got to take them on a different journey depending on what your product is.
And I guess the buying group changes as well, depending on what you're selling. You know, a higher ticket item, the buying group's going to be larger. And would that mean that there'll be more meetings I need to have in that hot phase?
No, well, the hot phase is you doing the research for the actual meeting itself. So what you're going to do is, and you'll flip into the next stage where the actual meeting has taken place, and you've hit the nail on the head there. It depends on what kind of target market you're selling to. So if you're selling into solo entrepreneurs, there's one decision maker that you're speaking to, and it's easy for you to have that meeting. If you're selling into enterprise, and I know some of the people who are watching us today and the people we speak to want to sell into enterprise clients, potentially you're talking that one person you're speaking to is only the tip of the iceberg of the people who are going to be involved in the buying decision. So you are going to probably have multiple meetings in the next phase, where in the hot phase, if you're selling to a solo entrepreneur or a smaller company, might move very, very quickly. Now, this again, you might have the same product. However, you need potentially several different sales processes now changing depending on who you're speaking to. And this is where sales processes get complex. And this is where companies start trying to cut corners. And that's where you shouldn't cut corners, because you could potentially miss a sale.
Give me an example of a classic corner cutting behavior that you see.
Classically, no one follows the process. Everyone's nurtured into the same kind of bunch of clients. We don't have enough. Also, our buying personas, we start talking to the wrong ideal customers, and we start spending our time in the wrong people. And also, we don't have an understanding of what the client actually wants. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to force our solution or our service down the customer's throat without actually understanding what we're doing, because we don't want to qualify, because qualifying is boring. And also, the customer doesn't want to answer questions because we didn't ask any questions. So what happens is we make assumptions and we cut corners because we think it'll speed up the process. What happens there is the customer actually doesn't understand what you're selling, and unless they've qualified themselves, the chances are they'll walk away from the sale.
I think the questions are absolutely critical. So many times I found myself when working with clients that they just haven't asked enough questions to do that qualification, like you say. And so actually they're moving the opportunity along the process, but it isn't actually ready to be moved. You know, you're making some assumptions, and then you're hopping from a hot prospect into from that third stage into our fourth. So those first three, cold, warm, and hot prospect, are all in our awareness phase of buying. Now we move with the fourth step into the second phase, which is interest, right? So stage four, to come out of hot prospects, what's stage four?
Well, this is your meetings. So this is where opportunity, I call it opportunity. Different people call it different things. People call it discovery or whatever. This is where, for me as a salesperson, this is an opportunity. An opportunity meaning that there's an opportunity for us to sell our product into this client, because everything. We've started qualifying. The client has the prospect has a need of what our solution could potentially solve. And this might then turn into multiple meetings where we are building our business case. And a business case is always numbers orientated. So you can't cut corners again and start showing your functions and features of all your products and say, oh, look what it does. And it does this lovely thing over here. No one, don't be scared about speaking numbers, because that's where the rubber hits the road. When you can start talking to the client about numbers, cost savings, whatever it is that your product brings, that's where the client is going to start thinking to themselves, this is interesting now, because you're speaking business language. Even if you're selling at the solo entrepreneur point of view, those people want to know what you are doing. Will it make me money? Will it save me money? What's it going to do? And if all you're showing is what color the tab on your, your platform is and how lovely it is, but that you're probably missing a few things. So the opportunity stage is where you know an opportunity, and through that, your qualification. That's where your qualification process starts. However, if you're in the world of SaaS and you're selling something that is where it needs to be trialed, that's where you would start your trial phase. That's a phase. That's where you would give them the product and say, hey, why don't you have it for a month? See how it goes, and they start the trial phase. So they're qualifying themselves to see how the product is. However, if you're selling something complex and something that's a little bit more complex to sell and also put into the company, this is where you start the qualification process.
And if we talked about larger buying groups, right? If you're aware, startups are aware that there are multiple people, what should they be thinking about in terms of those individuals? Is there anything they should be doing?
Yeah, well, we're going to get into this, I think, next time in our next webinar, when we're going to talk about enterprise selling. If you are selling into a buying group, and this is enterprise selling, you really need to start trying to find out who the decision-making group is within that sales process, because you might be speaking to somebody who might actually just be there researching different products and different services, just to get an understanding of what's out there, and then they're going to make a decision. So you might think they're the decision maker, but actually they're not the decision maker. They are assisting the decision makers in the background. So from your processing opportunity where you're qualifying the lead, what you want to do at that point is find out what is this. And if you're selling into enterprise, there's a buying group behind it. If you're selling into a solo entrepreneur or a smaller company, you might actually be speaking to the person who's going to buy it, and there might not be a long sales cycle here at all.
And irrespective of who you're selling into, I think your point about data and numbers is really valuable. It's why calculators work. It's why evidence works. Being able to calculate a potential saving or potential return on investment is numbers are very powerful. So I think that's good advice across the board. Okay, so that we're halfway through. That's 4 phases, right? We've got cold, warm, hot, and then we're into opportunity or meeting as stage 4. Stage 5 then. What's stage 5? What's next?
Stage 5, if we're talking complex selling, this is where you're either going to go into your secondary meetings, or you're going to get ready to present your solution to the buying group or the individuals out there. Remember, there might not be a trial here for the product you're selling, or it's something that can't be trialed. So it's something that they have to actually purchase. So you would do a presentation. That presentation is built on the back of your qualification. So all that qualification you've done before, where you found out what the need is, what the value is, who the stakeholders are, classic qualification kind of way of looking at it. Once you've got all that information, and let's say you're selling something that is what is technical or technology based, you might even have your pre-sales people involved here, where they're going to do the demo. But remember, they're going to be doing a demo for what the customer actually has the problem for. And potentially, if you are a very sophisticated startup, you might even have value engineers who are created the value case or the business case that goes behind this. However, if you're a startup, the chances are you don't have these. But again, this business case that you develop, this presentation stage, is where you're going to wow the customer by showing them everything that you've done beforehand. I've listened to you. What I've got for you now is a tailor-made, bespoke solution that does everything that you need it to do. Please buy it, Mr. Customer.
Obviously, it's a compelling event, isn't it? Building up to that presentation, to that delivery, whether it's in person or virtually, and how that's followed up with a written proposition. It's such an important phase. One of the things that I've learned over the last few years is the ongoing qualification. So even as we're working up to presentation, getting that information, that qualification has to just keep going. And we've really put it at the heart of how we run our sales function. It wasn't something I knew before I got into the world of sales. So, could you talk us through the kind of key areas for you in terms of qualification, right? What are the things that are absolutely critical that people should be thinking about and scoring their opportunities on? How best should deals be qualified by startups?
Yeah, depending on, it all goes back to what you're selling and who you're selling it to. So there isn't one qualification process that works for everybody. Some of them are better fits for certain industries than others. So what I would say to you is that all of them have some value of need, where you're measuring the need from the customer's point of view, not your need. As a salesperson, my need is to sell as much as I can. However, the need, what we're talking about, is the need of the customer. So what's their need? How high can you gauge their need? Now, remember, if you're selling to multiple people in an organization, there are different levels of need depending on the stakeholder you're speaking to. It starts getting quite complicated. Also, then you go look at value. What is the value of this is where the ROI of your solution comes in. So you need to, that's why the numbers are so important. And especially if you're selling into enterprise, like I've said before, it doesn't matter where you're selling into, the numbers matter. So the thing is, the value really counts. So if you're presenting without understanding the client's need and without able to show value, why are you even presenting?
Yeah.
You're basically wasting an opportunity. You might as well just throw it in the bin and walk away. And I don't care what anyone says about that thing. It's annoying. And that is cutting a corner. So qualify correctly. Those two things are important. Is there time? Does the person have, when it comes to time, when are they going to purchase this thing? How important is it? Is there urgency for purchase? That's really important. Stakeholders, have you got the right people in the room? It's a nuance on knowing what your industry you're selling into, and also the market you're selling into. So yeah, there's loads of different qualification criteria out there. Have a look. You should be using one, and if you're not using one, talk to us, and I can point you happily in a direction of a qualification metrics that you should be using for your industry.
Thank you. So that was stage 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Presenting. Let's move on to stage 6. What's next after the presentation has happened?
We call this proposal sent. So we have all these, Alice, we've been working on these in the sense of, these are verbs, so this is where you send the actual proposal. So what we want to do, now at this point, some people might call this negotiation, objection handling, depending on how you look at it. Tell you the truth, the major thing that you're trying to do here is send a proposal. And at that point, you might negotiate. There might be objections from the client. And at this phase, this is where the conversation is getting to the point where there is a deal there. There is an opportunity for the client to do that they want to purchase, and for you to actually be able to sell. And you're going through that putting the final pieces together so everybody gets what they want. So that's proposal send.
Thank you. So we've covered the first 6 phases, right? There's cold, warm, hot. Then we're into opportunity meetings, presentation, and then the proposal sent. So the last two stages we're into, which is the third phase of the buying journey, which we call retain. So two stages left. What's number 7? What's the penultimate stage?
Well, basically, it's winner dance, as we would call it in the world of sales. This is where the client says yes. and well, they no longer are a prospect. Sorry, and I keep on doing that same mistake. But they no longer say they're no longer a prospect. They turn into a client. They sign the contract or whatever they need to do to purchase your product, service, and they become a customer. So that's quite an easy one. However, at that point, you could also lose the prospect. So that splits into two. That closed phase is either won or lost.
Okay, that makes sense, right? The proposal's gone out. The next bit is effectively closing, closed won, closed lost, and obviously some feedback. And I love that we talk about that. Either the money's kind of like arrived in the bank or it hasn't, right? So that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. So if that's stage 7, what's stage 8 then?
In the new world of selling, very few companies now sell a product where you just give somebody the widget, the gadget, whatever it is. You give them that thing and you just say bye bye. Never want to see you ever again. We're all in this world now, especially in tech and in the startup economy, where we're trying to retain our customers, and there's probably onboarding of the technology or the solution that we're sending, and there's probably other products we can sell. And so this turns into customer success, and this is such a big thing out there now. Have you seen how many jobs have now flipped from people being salespeople, now people turning into customer success managers, CSMs? There's so many of these jobs out there. It's crazy, because that's where retaining customers is now the big thing. So if you haven't got that in your sales process, where you've got customer success as phase 8, and that then brings you back around the whole. That's why I said no longer do people see it as a sales funnel. You don't go down and just out at the bottom. What you tend to do is you go around. So what you want to do is bring back your customers, because in 1 year's time or 2 years' time, whatever it is, there's probably a renewal date on your product. And what you want to do is make sure that the client renews. However, also at that time, you might have other products and you might want to sell into them. So the customer success phase is very, very important.
Yeah, from my agency days running professional services teams, we would talk about keeping the back door closed. It's fine. You want the front door open, you want new clients coming in, but if they're just slipping out the back door, not looking after them properly, then all that effort is wasted. That's great. Thank you. So those 8 stages, the blueprint for success is cold, warm, and hot. Then we're into opportunity, which is meetings. Then the presentation and proposal sent, and the last 2, closing, and then customer success, keeping that back door closed. A real whistle-stop tour. Thank you very much. That was really helpful. Great. You and I kind of sharing the sections and the answers you use, super helpful. The stat that I talked about at the top of the show, the 49.6% of startups, that being the average score, that came through the work we've done with startups over the last 12 months, nearly 50 of them who we've put through our 360 sales diagnostic, which is a 75-minute meeting with us. And then we produce a 25-page personalized report with bespoke recommendations and incremental revenue roadmap. If you're interested in getting that, you can head over to our website, theupliftpartnership.com/360. We use a little bit of tech in that, a little bit of AI tech in order to capture and crunch some of the information we get from our clients. And actually, tech is so important now that we're starting to see a kind of gulf, right? Not only are those who are overwhelmed by tech or can't get on with the latest technology tools, their quotas, those salespeople are achieving 43% lower quotas, according to Harvard Business Review. So if you don't get on top of the tech, you're not closing as much. And at the other end, what's widening the chasm is that those who are harnessing technology properly, harnessing AI well, are generating an extra 27% of bandwidth for themselves, according to Gartner. So there is a growing technology divide of the haves and haves not in the area of sales. And it's one of the reasons that we built our latest product, fresh off the production line, our sales playbook generator. upliftpartnership.com/SPG if you want to check it out. It is a super rapid, semi-automated process where we create the sales playbook, which is arguably the most important sales asset for a startup. If you're interested in that, take a look at the website, or speak to one of us on LinkedIn. And then the last thing to say is, Kieran mentioned it already, our next live show in 2 weeks is going to be Selling into Enterprise, 5 golden rules for startup on Tuesday, the 5th of March. Hopefully we'll see you for that. That's it. We're perfectly out of time. Thank you very much for your time, Kieran. That was really helpful, like 8 steps for everybody. We'll share the recording afterwards. Any final words, my friend, for a startup or a co-founder or C-suite startup person on this call listening to us? What would be the one thing that they should probably take away and go and do now if they had an hour free?
Sit down and write your process down and make it as detailed as you want it to. It should be as detailed as you can make it to be. Do not make it ad hoc. Follow that process and look at your metrics that you're getting from it, because what that will show you where your problems are. And that's the first thing I do when we consult companies at the Uplift Partnership. I'll look at that data, and within that point, I will be able to pinpoint where the problems are and what needs to change. And that's what any startup should be doing for themselves, even if they aren't working with us. That's the first thing they should do. Detail it. Don't be ad hoc. Don't be random in your process. Try to be as structured as possible, and then try to get yourself to be dynamic as time goes on.
Super advice. Thank you very much for your time. We're out now. We're going to say goodbye. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.